My name is Claire Donovan, and I was 28 years old when I married Marcus Webb on a Saturday in June and became, according to a letter from my parents' attorney that arrived 14 days later, no longer a beneficiary of my parents' estate. I want to start with the wedding, because the wedding is the center of everything good in this story, and I want you to understand what the good looked like before I tell you about the letter. The ceremony was at a small venue in the city, 22 people, the people who actually knew us and had been present in our lives and wanted to be there, rather than people who needed to be invited for the sake of appearances. Marcus wore a dark blue suit he had been measured for 6 weeks earlier. I wore a dress I had found in a vintage shop on a Thursday afternoon and had known immediately was the one. We had written our own vows, not long ones, real ones, the kind that say the thing you actually mean in the specific language of people who have been paying attention to each other for 4 years and know exactly what they are promising. My parents were not in the room, not because I had not sent the invitation. I had. I had sent it 6 months after the conversation with my father that had made it clear to me what the invitation was going to mean to them and what their response was going to be. I had sent it anyway because I believed, or wanted to believe, that people were capable of choosing love over what they had decided to believe, and because I had not been ready at the time the invitation was sent to fully accept that my parents were not those people. They did not come. I was not surprised by the time the Saturday arrived. I had had 6 months to move from hoping to knowing, and the knowing had arrived fully by the morning of the wedding. Before I tell you about the attorney's letter, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city in the comments. I love knowing where you are when you listen to this. Now let me tell you about the conversation that started all of it. I need to tell you about the conversation with my father, because the letter only makes complete sense if you understand what preceded it. Marcus and I had been together for 4 years when I brought him home for the first time. I had not brought him home earlier because I had been, without fully acknowledging it to myself, giving my parents time to become the people I needed them to be before the meeting happened. I had been talking about him for 2 years, describing him, telling stories about him, allowing my parents to know who he was before they knew what he looked like. I understand now that I was doing something I should not have had to do, which is pre-managing my parents' reaction to a person they should have simply been prepared to welcome because he was someone I loved. I understand now that the management itself was a sign, that needing to prepare the ground this carefully was information about what the ground was made of. At the time, I told myself I was being thoughtful. The meeting was at a Sunday dinner at my parents' house. My mother had made the meal she made when she wanted things to go well. The table was set the way she set it for important occasions. Everything on the surface was the performance of welcome. Marcus was exactly who he always was, warm and specific, and genuinely interested in the people around him. He asked my father about his work and listened fully to the answer. He complimented my mother's cooking accurately because he actually tasted it rather than performing appreciation. He was, by any reasonable measure, precisely the kind of person you want your daughter to bring home. My father waited until Marcus had gone to the bathroom. He looked at me across the table and he said, "Claire, this cannot go anywhere." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You know what I mean." He said it the way people say things they do not want to say directly, because saying them directly would require them to hear themselves say the thing out loud and understand what it reveals. I said, "Say it directly, Dad." He said it directly, and I heard it, and something shifted in me in that moment that I do not think has ever fully shifted back. Not to anger, to clarity. The specific, cold clarity of a person who has just seen something they already knew was there and has finally been forced to look at it completely. I told Marcus in the car on the way home not everything immediately. I told him the essential thing, that my father had said what he said, that my mother had sat behind him and said nothing, that I needed him to know before we went any further what we were dealing with on my side of the family. He listened without interrupting. He had the specific quality of attention he always had, full and unhurried, the attention of a man who understands that some things require being heard before they require being responded to. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Claire, what do you want to do?" I said, "I want to marry you." I said it without hesitation because it was the most true thing I knew how to say, and true things do not require hesitation. I said, "I want to marry you, and I want to be honest with you about what that is going to cost on my side, and I want to make that decision together with full information rather than hoping things will be different than they are." He said, "I love you." He said, "I want to marry you too." He said, "I need you to know that you do not owe me the cost of your family." I said, "I know I do not owe you it." I said, "I am choosing it." He looked at me. He said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Marcus, I have never been more sure of anything." We got engaged 3 months later. We planned the wedding for the following June. I sent my parents an invitation in February with a handwritten note inside that said, "We would love to have you there." The invitation was not returned. The note was not acknowledged. 6 weeks before the wedding, my mother called and said, "Claire, your father is not going to change his position." I said, "I know, Mom." I said, "Are you coming?" She was quiet. She said, "I cannot come without your father." I said, "I know." I said, "I love you." She said, "I love you too." She said it quietly, and I believed she meant it, and I also believed in that moment and in every moment since that love is not only a feeling, it is also a choice, and my mother had made hers. We were married on a Saturday in June, with 22 people who wanted to be there. It was the most complete day of my life. 2 weeks later, the attorney's letter arrived. The letter was from a firm I did not recognize, representing my parents. It was formal and precisely worded in the specific language of legal documents that are designed to communicate a decision without inviting a response. It informed me that, as of the date of my marriage, I had been removed as a beneficiary from my parents' estate, that all prior provisions made in my favor had been revoked, that this decision was final and had been made in consultation with legal counsel and represented my parents' considered and permanent position. I read it twice. I folded it. I put it in a folder the way I put everything important in a folder, because I am a person who keeps records, and because some part of me understood that this document was a record I should maintain. I told Marcus that evening. He was in the kitchen when I came in, and he looked at my face and said, "What happened?" I handed him the letter. He read it, he set it down, he crossed the room, and he held my hand and he said, "I am sorry, Claire." I said, "I am not." He looked at me. I said, "Marcus, I knew who they were when I married you." I said, "They showed me who they were at that Sunday dinner, and I made my choice with full knowledge of what it was going to cost." I said, "I chose you anyway." I said, "I would choose you again right now." He said, "Claire." I said, "The letter is just the paperwork of something I already knew." He held my hand for a long time without saying anything else. Emotional pause. I called my grandmother the following Sunday, my father's mother, a woman of 81 who had been, across my entire life, the family member who had known me most clearly and who had loved me in the specific way of people who see you accurately rather than as an idea of you they have constructed. I told her about the letter. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Claire, I want you to know something." She said, "What your parents have done is wrong." She said, "I am ashamed of it." She said, "I want you to know that I see you and I see Marcus, and what I see is a woman who chose correctly and a man who deserves to be chosen." I said, "Grandma." She said, "I love you." I said, "I love you too." She said, "I am going to make a call to my attorney this week." I said, "You do not have to do anything." She said, "I know I do not have to." She said, "That is not the point." My grandmother called her attorney the following week. She did not tell me the specifics of what she was doing because she was not a woman who made announcements about her decisions before they were complete. She made them, and then she informed you. And the informing had the quality of a thing that was already done and did not require your input because she had already provided her own. She died 2 years after that Sunday phone call, peacefully, in her own home, the way she had always said she wanted to go. I was with her in the final weeks, the way I was with everyone I loved who needed me to be present. Marcus came with me. He sat with her in the evenings when she was too tired for long conversations, and they talked about small things, and she called him Marcus Dear, which was a name she had given him at their first meeting, and which he had received with a specific warmth of a man who understood what it meant to be genuinely welcomed. The will was read 3 weeks after her death. My parents were there. I had not known they were going to be there, and I had not known what the will contained, and I sat in the attorney's office across a table from my father for the first time in 3 years, and we did not speak before the reading began. She had left me the house, the one she had lived in for 40 years, the one with the garden she had tended every weekend, and the kitchen where she had taught me to cook, and the specific warmth of a place that had always been the place where I was most completely myself. She had left it entirely to me. She had also left a letter, addressed to the room, to everyone present. The attorney read it. I am not going to share all of it because some of it belongs to me and to Marcus, and to the specific privacy of love that has been witnessed and honored. What I will tell you is that the letter addressed what my parents had done, clearly, without euphemisms, in the specific language of a woman who had decided that her death was going to be the moment she said what she had been watching for years, and had not said while she was alive, because saying it while she was alive would have produced a conflict that would have hurt people she loved. She said it after, when it could not be argued with. My father looked at the table while the letter was read. My mother looked at her hands. I looked at Marcus beside me, and he looked at me, and neither of us said anything, because nothing needed to be said. My grandmother had said it, in a room nobody could leave, with an attorney present, in a document that was filed and permanent. My father has not spoken to me since the reading. My mother called once. She said, "Claire, I have been thinking." I said, "I know." She said, "I am sorry." I said, "I know you are." She said, "It is too late, isn't it?" I said, "For some things, yes." I said, "For others, I do not know yet." I said, "I am not going to tell you it is fine, because it is not fine. What they did was wrong, and my grandmother said so, and I agree with her." She was quiet. Then she said, "She was always the wisest one of us." I said, "Yes, she was." Marcus and I live in my grandmother's house now. The garden is still tended. The kitchen still smells the way it always smelled. I cook in it the way she taught me. On Sunday mornings, Marcus makes coffee and I make breakfast, and we sit at the kitchen table that has been in that house for 40 years, and we talk about ordinary things, and the ordinary things are the whole world. My grandmother understood something that my parents did not, that love is a choice, that the choosing is everything, that what you leave behind when you are gone is the record of what you chose and the people your choices protected. She chose me. She put it in writing. She made it permanent. I chose Marcus on a Saturday in June with 22 people in the room. I would choose him again every single day. That is not a statement about what I lost. It is a statement about what I have, which is everything that actually matters. If you have ever been made to feel that who you love is a choice someone else gets to approve, this story is for you. It is not their choice. It was never their choice. And the people who love you without condition are your real family, regardless of what the original paperwork says. That is my story. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your city in the comments. Hit subscribe. I will see you in the next one.